All right, friends, greetings once again. Podcast 9 in ecology is dealing with, it says, life history strategies and population growth. Biologically speaking, a successful organism is one that is able to reproduce and leave offspring. And the more reproduction with leaving of offspring that are successful that you do, the more successful your species is. Okay? So, we talk about then different ways that different organisms have succeeded in getting their populations to grow. We talk about these as life history strategies. There's not just one way to increase your population size. There's a variety of ways depending on what kind of critter you are, what kind of habitat you live in, and so on. There's no one right way. If it works, it works. That said, there are some general trends that we see overall, that some general themes we can refer to. So we're going to talk about life history strategies, which is basically how you are able to, what's your method for reproduction and leaving offspring and getting through a life cycle. Okay? So, how an organism goes about its life while getting the maximum offspring, surviving offspring possible. Remember, in biology, success means you reproduce and you have lots of surviving offspring, well adapted to their environment, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Now, natural selection, then, because evolutionarily speaking, organisms, unless they leave offspring, are not successful. Offspring are what allow the species to send itself into time, into the next generation and the periods of time after that. So, natural selection then favors any strategy that is going to maximize this reproductive success. An organism that is able to leave lots of healthy offspring is going to be favored over one that cannot, because that's what natural selection and ultimately evolution are all about. So, natural selection then always acts to maximize the number of offspring that are successful. And thus it will always favor organisms who have life history strategies, who have ways of doing things that are going to maximize the total number of successful offspring they can have. So this is not rocket science. It's all these words kind of tend to make things complicated. It's not. In biology, because of the way natural selection works and the way species survive, the more babies that you have that are successful, the better. And so natural selection is going to act to favor that and favor those life history strategies that organisms have that are going to allow them to maximize the greatest number of offspring they possibly can. Okay? So, as we said before when we opened up this podcast, there's more than one way to do this. We don't all achieve lots of population growth in the same way. Humans have one baby at a time. Mosquitoes have a zillion babies at a time. We both are successful species. We aren't going about replenishing our population in the same way. We do it differently, but we get the same successful result. So, remember, not all organisms are the same, not all environments are the same, and because of all this variety, there's lots of variety in life history strategies. There is no one right way to do it, but there are certain patterns, okay? So, the two patterns that are most obvious, that we can most easily talk about, are R-selected life history strategies and K-selected strategies or species with the organisms that do these strategies are R-selected or K-selected species. So let's first look at an R strategist. I should have made that a lowercase. When I try to keep this straight in my head, I try to think of R as rapid, quick, okay? So R makes me think of these kinds of things. Our strategists tend, first of all, to be found in places where the habitat is not stable. It's changing a lot. So when conditions are suitable, boom, they have to be ready to go, have lots of babies, and get it done quick. They tend to have short lifespans. They tend to not take long before they're reproductively mature, meaning they can be born, mature really quick, and have babies right away. So that leads us also to short generation times. Large numbers of offspring at once, and usually very, very little, non-existent even, parental care. This means that lots of the babies are going to die. They're going to have zillions of them, but lots of them are going to die. But the idea is, okay, we're just going to have lots of babies, and then we're going to see you later and hope a few of you guys make it. And usually they do. It's easiest for me when I think of an R strategist, I think of a mosquito. Okay, there's lots of things that can fit into this, but a mosquito needs a little pool of stagnant water to reproduce, and that pool may come after a rain and may evaporate after just a few days, so they've got to zoom and take advantage of that habitat right then and get ready to go have those babies. They've got to grow up and mature and so on very quickly. So that's an R strategist. Now, a K strategist is going to be kind of the exact opposite. These kinds of strategists will tend to be found in stable habitats where there's not a lot of rapid change. They can count on that environment being there for a long time. And they have to, because everything's going to take longer with an R strategist. I'm sorry, with a K strategist. My bad. K. That is the letter of the alphabet. So they will have long lifespans. They tend to be long-lived. They don't mature very quickly. They breed later in life. So you've got several years perhaps will pass before the organism can have babies. Long generation times, not very many babies produced, but often there's a fair amount of parental care. So the strategy being, we're not going to have tons of babies, we're just going to have a few, but we're going to take really, really, really good care of them. And thus a greater percentage of them may make it to reproductive age themselves. The one I think of right away for this is human, us. We're K strategists, okay? This is exactly how we go about things. So, here's a great example of some R-selected species. There's our mosquito. Remember, we cannot forget that plants are people too. Well, of course, they're not people, but they are living things. They are organisms. So let's not forget dandelions, great examples. They reproduce quickly. Lots of offspring, just going to be released into the wind. Very classic R strategist. Little mice. Lots of babies at once, multiple litters. A female mouse I can't remember how many litters, but she's a reproductive factory. Lots of babies. Okay? K-selected, on the other hand, elephant would be excellent K-selected, very long time to maturity, and takes a long time for each baby to be born. They take care of it. The penguin, another example, that one egg that they take care of, all their eggs in one basket, all their reproductive hopes in one egg, so to speak. So, K-selected versus R-selected. All right, another topic kind of related to this that we should talk about is a survivorship curve. And this is a type of graph that kind of basically is comparing age of the organism to how many of the organisms are surviving of a particular species. And what this does is it will, again, reveal these kind of R-selected, K-selected strategies. There are three main curves we're going to look at, okay? The first type that we'll talk about is type 1. Type 1 is this green line here, and what you see is lifespan from 0 lifespan to 100% of your maximum lifespan. So let's say this is an 80-year-old person over here at the end and a 0 infant. And what we see is we have a pretty large number. Here's the number surviving, or per thousand. So we have almost everyone surviving when we're young. Almost everyone, and that slowly falls until we hit old age, and then we get a rapid decline in old age. So the highest death rate is in the years after reproductive age, okay? That is a typical case strategist, okay? Type 2 curve. Type 2 is this middle blue line where basically you're just as likely to be eaten no matter how old you are. It doesn't really matter. You have prey items stamped on your forehead. A squirrel is a classic type 2. You're just as likely to be eaten when you're a baby as you are an adult. You are a prey item, okay? These hydra are examples of that according to this graphic. Okay, the last curve is a type 3, and what you see here is, boy, those little babies, they die off. But if we can make it past that first part of the lifespan, then if we make it to adulthood, we have a very good chance of living to be a very, very old organism. Oysters are great examples. The larvae are part of the plankton, and everything eats the plankton, so the oyster larvae just get gobbled up. But if an oyster can get established, it's very, very well defended in its shell, and it is likely to live a very long time, minus some diseases and so on that are causing problems for them these days. But so those are survivorship curves. I would commit these to memory, okay? Commit these to memory. You should understand this graph. Type 1, type 2, and type 3. And just to again emphasize the survivorship curves and the different strategies we already mentioned, okay? This is the classic K selected is associated with a type 1 survivorship curve. The R selected is associated more with the type 3 survivorship curve, where lots of babies die initially. Okay? All right. And this is kind of showing you a little bit of a good example of that middle type 2. So I'm going to write type 2. This is a Belding ground squirrel. It's just a type of ground squirrel. We don't have them around here. But a study was done showing that basically we're looking at a pretty linear relationship between age and survivorship. But we do notice that the males overall tend to die off at a greater rate than the females, interestingly, perhaps because they're competing for mates and things like that. So basically what we're seeing is a relatively constant rate of death. They are a prey item throughout their lives, okay? All right, so if reproduction is so important, then why don't all organisms just reproduce all the time? If that is what makes natural selection favor you, then if natural selection favors leaving offspring behind, then why in the world aren't all organisms just reproducing all the time? There's lots and lots of trade-offs. We trade off, and that's why there are these kind of different strategies. If you parental survival versus reproduction of offspring. The more babies you have, the more resources it takes from the parents, the less likely the parents are to survive to have more offspring. The more babies you have, the better the parents survive, however. perhaps the offspring aren't getting as much as they need so that they can survive. Reproduction demands a whole lot from the parents. The energy that goes into making eggs is very, very demanding on a female. The energy required to build a nest, for example, and of course providing food, serious energy demands. If a parent is putting all that energy into offspring, they cannot take care of their own survival needs. And if the parent dies, then perhaps offspring don't do as well either. So parents can't just reproduce babies all the time because it is going to take a toll on the parent as well. So we have to make trade-offs. What's the maximum amount of babies that we can have without killing off our parent, basically, in the process? For example, this is a type of bird, we do have these around here. It's called an American kestrel. It's our tiniest little falcon. As you can see, if the brood size or the number of babies they have at a time is reduced, then we see that the parents survive very, very well. They don't have as many babies to take care of, and the parents survive well. But if we increase the brood size, lots of babies at a time, past what's normal, then we can see that the parent survival rate goes down dramatically. So this normal brood size is kind of trying to strike a balance between we have a fair amount of babies and we don't kill off our parents and so on. And notice that, again, the males have a lower survival rate than the females. So caring for more offspring negatively affects the survival of parents. So there has to be some balance struck. Okay? All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. I will catch you in the next podcast.